The restaurant was one of the most expensive in town. A place where the wealthy dined, where the lighting was soft, the air smelled of grilled steak and fine wine, and the sound of quiet conversations mixed with the clinking of glasses. A well-dressed millionaire stepped inside with his new girlfriend beside him. He wore an expensive watch, a custom-tailored suit, and the kind of confidence that came with success. His date, a stunning woman with perfect makeup and a designer dress, smiled up at him as they walked toward their reserved table. It was supposed to be a perfect night. A romantic dinner, good food, and maybe even something more after. But then he saw her. His feet froze mid-step. His stomach tightened. His breath caught in his throat. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. The dim lighting, maybe a passing shadow. But no. It was her. His ex-wife. And she was pregnant. Wearing a simple black uniform, her hair pulled back, she moved carefully between tables, holding a tray with shaking hands. Her belly was round, unmistakable, she was far along. And she was waiting tables. The millionaire's world tilted. He hadn't seen her in over a year. Not since the divorce papers were signed, not since they walked away from each other, thinking their lives were headed in different directions. But why was she here? Why was she working? Why did she look so tired? His new girlfriend noticed his reaction. She followed his gaze, then looked back at him. "Do you know her?" she asked, curious. He didn't answer. He couldn't. Because suddenly, his ex-wife turned, and their eyes met. A single moment stretched into eternity. Her face said everything. Shock. Pain. 1,000 unspoken words. And then, she looked away. Like he was just another customer. Like he was a stranger. But he knew better. Something was wrong. And deep down, he had to know the truth. The millionaire sat at his table, but his mind wasn't there. His new girlfriend was talking, smiling, sipping her wine, but he wasn't listening. His eyes kept drifting toward her. His ex-wife. The woman he once loved. The woman he once planned to build a future with. And now, she was pregnant and serving tables? He gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles turning white. He had questions. Too many questions. What happened after the divorce? Who was the father? Why was she working here, struggling, instead of moving on like he had? His girlfriend noticed his silence. "Are you okay?" she asked, tilting her head. He forced a smile. "Yeah, just thinking about work." She laughed. "You work too much. That's why you need this night out with me." She reached for his hand, her fingers brushing against his. But for the first time, he didn't feel present. His mind was elsewhere. Then, he saw her again. His ex-wife was balancing a tray, carefully avoiding a customer's chair. But he could see it, the strain in her face, the exhaustion in her steps. She was struggling. His heart twisted in a way he hadn't expected. Then, as if fate had planned it, she turned towards his table. Their eyes met again. This time, she couldn't avoid him. She stood there, holding the tray, frozen in place. The expression on her face was unreadable: anger? Hurt? Regret? She exhaled sharply and stepped forward. "Good evening," she said in a flat tone, her voice professional. "Are you ready to order?" His girlfriend smiled, oblivious to the tension. "Yes. I'll have the filet mignon with garlic butter." His ex-wife jotted it down, her hand shaking slightly. Then she turned to him. "And you?" He hesitated. He could feel his throat tighten. He could barely breathe. His past and present were colliding in a way he never expected. And before he could stop himself, the words slipped out. "Is it mine?" His girlfriend frowned. What? His ex-wife's pen stopped moving. Her body stiffened. For a moment, there was silence. Then, she lifted her head, her eyes cold and unreadable. "You don't get to ask that," she whispered. And before he could say another word, she turned and walked away. The air in the restaurant suddenly felt thick. The millionaire sat still, his hands resting on the table, his heartbeat uneven. His ex-wife's words rang in his ears. "You don't get to ask that." The way she said it, cold, distant, sent a chill down his spine. It wasn't just anger. It was hurt. His new girlfriend let out a small, awkward laugh. "Okay, what was that about?" He forced himself to act normal, shaking his head. "Nothing. Just an old story." She raised an eyebrow. "An old story?" He grabbed his glass, sipping his drink to avoid answering. He could feel his girlfriend's curiosity growing. But he didn't care. Because his mind was stuck on something else. The way his ex-wife looked. The way she walked away, holding back something, a secret. And that baby bump. Was it his? The thought hit him like a train. He had moved on. He had built a life without her. But now? Now, everything felt shaky. Across the restaurant, he saw her talking to another waitress. Her hands were trembling. She was struggling. But why? He found himself watching her. She was thinner than he remembered. Her face was tired, like she wasn't sleeping enough. She shouldn't be working in this condition. And then, something strange happened. As she walked past the bar, the restaurant manager stepped in front of her. The millionaire narrowed his eyes. The manager, a bald man in his 50s, dressed in a tight vest, leaned in close. Too close. He said something to her. Something that made her flinch. Her hands gripped the tray tighter. The manager's eyes were cold, his lips twisting into a sneer. His ex-wife nodded stiffly, then hurried away, her face pale. What was that? A strange feeling crawled up the millionaire's spine. He knew that look. He had seen it before. Fear. Was she afraid of that man? His girlfriend suddenly snapped her fingers. "Hey! Earth to you. You're zoning out." He turned back to her. "Sorry. He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I think I need to step outside for a moment." His girlfriend frowned. "Are you serious? In the middle of dinner?" But he wasn't listening anymore. He pushed his chair back and stood up. Because something in his gut told him, something was very, very wrong. And he had to find out what. The millionaire's pulse quickened as he made his way toward the back of the restaurant. He didn't know what he was looking for, he just knew that something was off. His ex-wife was pregnant and working, and now it seemed like she was scared of the manager. None of it made sense. As he walked past the bar, he heard whispers from a few waiters. Poor thing. She shouldn't even be working in her condition. Yeah, but what choice does she have? You know how the manager is. The millionaire slowed his steps. The manager. That was the second time he had been mentioned. Something was definitely wrong. He kept walking until he reached a narrow hallway leading to the staff area. A sign read, "Employees only," but he didn't care. He needed answers. Then, he heard it. A low, angry voice. He stepped closer, peeking around the corner. His ex-wife stood near the storage room. Her hands were clenched, her shoulders tense. And the restaurant manager was standing too close to her. "I told you before," the manager's voice was a sharp whisper. "I don't care if you're pregnant. You do what I say, or you're out." Her voice was low but firm. "Please. I just need a little more time." The manager's face twisted into an ugly smirk. Time? You think I'm running a charity? You still owe me. Owe him? The millionaire stiffened. The manager leaned in closer. And if you don't like it, maybe I should remind you what happens when people don't pay their debts. Her breath hitched. Fear. Real, pure fear. The millionaire felt his hands ball into fists. What debt? What had this man done to her? And why did she look like she was trapped? Suddenly, she whispered, I'll get you the money. Just, don't do anything stupid. The manager laughed. Oh sweetheart, you should know by now, I decide what's stupid. He reached toward her, grabbing her wrist. And that was it. The millionaire stepped forward. Let her go. The words came out sharper than he expected. Both of them froze. The manager turned, eyes narrowing. And who the hell are you? His ex-wife's face drained of color. You shouldn't be here. The millionaire ignored her, stepping closer. I said let her go. The manager smirked, not intimidated. Oh, I see. You must be the ex. The millionaire's jaw tightened. The manager shrugged, finally releasing her wrist. Relax. We were just talking. His ex-wife rubbed her arm where the manager had held her. She was shaking. The millionaire turned to her. What's going on? She looked at him, her eyes pleading. Just leave, please. This isn't your problem. But the millionaire had already made up his mind. This was his problem now. Because one thing was clear, she was in danger. And he needed to find out why. The air between them felt heavy, thick with tension. The millionaire kept his eyes locked on the manager, his body tense, ready. He had seen enough. His ex-wife stood between them, looking pale, her hands trembling. Just go, she whispered. Please. You don't understand. But he wasn't leaving. He turned back to the manager. What debt is she talking about? The manager let out a slow chuckle, folding his arms. Oh, she didn't tell you? He looked at the ex-wife. That's funny. You'd think the father of your child would know the mess you're in. His stomach dropped. Father? He turned to her, but she wouldn't meet his gaze. The manager smirked. Guess she likes keeping secrets. The millionaire's fists clenched. Enough with the games. What are you doing to her? The manager stepped closer, his voice low and mocking. She owes me money. A lot of it. And if she doesn't pay up, well, let's just say, accidents happen. His jaw tightened. You're threatening a pregnant woman? The manager smiled. No. I'm reminding her of our deal. The millionaire turned to his ex-wife, his voice softer now. Is this true? She looked away, guilt flashing in her eyes. Then she nodded. Yes. A cold knot formed in his chest. How much? The manager grinned. 50 grand. The millionaire barely kept his face neutral. That was nothing to him. He could fix this in seconds. But then his ex-wife spoke. I don't want your money. He stared at her. You'd rather work for him than take my help? Her expression hardened. I can handle this myself. The manager laughed. You? Handle this? Please. You're barely keeping up as it is. The millionaire felt anger rising. You're exploiting her. The manager shrugged. Call it what you want. But she signed the deal. She pays, or she suffers the consequences. The ex-wife's hands curled into fists. I'll pay you, just give me more time. The manager smirked. Time isn't free. And then, he reached for her again. That was the last straw. The millionaire's hand shot out, grabbing the manager's wrist tight. Touch her again, and you'll regret it." The manager's smirk faded. He tried to pull his arm away, but the millionaire didn't let go. The restaurant was silent now. People had noticed. Eyes were watching. The manager's jaw tightened. "You think you can just walk in here and fix this?" The millionaire's voice was low, controlled, dangerous. "I don't think. I know." The manager yanked his arm back, his face red with anger. He looked at the ex-wife. "You better figure out where your loyalty lies, sweetheart." Then, he turned and stormed away. The restaurant slowly went back to normal, people whispering but pretending they hadn't seen anything. The millionaire turned back to his ex-wife. "Are you okay?" She let out a shaky breath. "You shouldn't have done that." He frowned. "You're pregnant and working yourself to exhaustion. And now I find out you're in debt to that scumbag? What happened to you?" Her eyes flickered with emotion, something deep, painful. Then she whispered, "I lost everything." The words hit him hard. He had left her. Moved on. Lived his life. But she? She had been fighting alone. For the first time, guilt settled deep in his chest. And he knew, he wasn't walking away this time. The millionaire couldn't look away. His ex-wife stood before him, looking smaller than he remembered, her arms wrapped protectively around herself. "I lost everything." Those words stung. He had spent the past year thinking she had moved on, just like he did. But now, seeing her pregnant, exhausted, in debt to a man who clearly had no mercy, he realized he had been wrong. So wrong. He exhaled slowly, trying to keep his voice steady. "What happened?" She swallowed, eyes darting around, as if looking for an escape. "I told you. I can handle it." His patience was running out. "You're working yourself to the ground while pregnant, terrified of some loan shark in a restaurant kitchen. That's not handling it." She flinched. "It's my problem, not yours." His jaw tightened. "That baby. Is it mine?" Silence. Her eyes filled with emotion, but she quickly turned away. "I have to get back to work." She tried to walk past him. But he gently grabbed her arm, stopping her. "No. You don't." She looked up at him, eyes wide, lips parted as if she wanted to argue. But before she could say anything, a loud crash. Both of them spun around. The manager had knocked over a tray, his glare locked on them. The entire restaurant was watching now. "What did I tell you?" the manager growled, storming toward them. "You don't talk to customers when you're on shift." The millionaire stepped in front of his ex-wife. "She's done for the night." The manager stopped, his nostrils flaring. "Oh, you think you can just decide that?" The tension was thick. People were staring. Waiters had stopped moving. Even his new girlfriend, still at the table, was watching. The millionaire squared his shoulders. "You've been exploiting her. Threatening her. That ends now." The manager sneered. "Oh yeah? And what are you going to do about it?" The millionaire gave him a cold, knowing smile. "I own businesses. I know how the system works. If you think I can't shut you down with a few calls, you're mistaken." The manager's face twisted with rage. "You rich types think you can do whatever you want. But this?" He motioned to the ex-wife. "This isn't about you. She owes me. And she'll pay, one way or another." His ex-wife visibly tensed, her hand moving to her stomach. The millionaire's blood boiled. Before he could say anything, the manager turned to his ex-wife. "You know what happens if you don't pay. You know the people I work with." She inhaled sharply. "You wouldn't," she whispered. The manager smirked. "Try me." Something snapped in the millionaire. He grabbed the manager by the collar, slamming him against the wall. A few gasps echoed around the restaurant. The manager laughed, even with his back pinned. "Bad move, rich boy." The millionaire leaned in, his voice low, dangerous. "You're not gonna touch her. You're not gonna come near her. You're done." The manager grinned. "You think this is over? You have no idea what you just walked into." A chill ran down the millionaire's spine. This wasn't just about restaurant debt. It was something bigger. His ex-wife grabbed his arm. "Please. Let him go." Slowly, the millionaire released his grip. The manager adjusted his collar, still smirking. "You don't know who you're messing with." Then he turned and walked away. The millionaire faced his ex-wife. "Tell me everything. Now." Her eyes shimmered with tears. She hesitated, then finally spoke. "If I don't pay, they'll come for me. And they won't care if I'm pregnant." His stomach dropped. This wasn't just about money. This was about danger. And now, he wasn't just trying to help. He was trying to save her life. The millionaire stared at her, his mind racing. "They'll come for you?" His voice was quieter now, but deadly serious. She nodded, her hands shaking. "It's not just about the money. These people, they're dangerous. If I don't pay, they'll make an example out of me." His jaw tightened. "Who are they?" She hesitated, then whispered, "People you don't cross." The weight of her words settled in his chest. This wasn't just debt. This was a threat to her life. And the babies. His baby. He already knew. She didn't have to say it. The look in her eyes, the way she avoided the truth, it all told him what he needed to know. And now, he wasn't just angry. He was furious. He took a slow breath. How did this happen? She wiped at her eyes. "After the divorce, I struggled. I lost the house. I lost my savings. I was desperate. And the manager, he offered to help. He said he knew people who could give me a loan." She laughed bitterly. "I was stupid. I took it." His hands clenched into fists. "And now they own you." She nodded. His head spun. How had he missed this? He had walked away from their marriage, thinking she'd be fine. He had assumed she'd move on, just like he did. But while he had been living in luxury, she had been drowning. And now, she was paying the price. Suddenly, the restaurant doors burst open. Two men walked in. Tall. Broad. Silent. His ex-wife stiffened immediately. The millionaire knew. These were the people she owed. They scanned the restaurant, their eyes landing on the manager. He walked toward them, whispering something in low tones. Then, one of them turned to the ex-wife. His voice was smooth, but cold. "Time's up." Her breath hitched. I just need a little more." The man tilted his head. That wasn't the deal. The millionaire stepped between them. "She's not paying you anything." The man looked him up and down. "And who are you?" The millionaire didn't answer. He just stared. The second man smirked. "You must be the ex-shame. She should have come to you sooner." The manager laughed from the corner. "You should walk away, rich boy. This isn't your fight." The millionaire's blood boiled. "It is now." The first man exhaled, shaking his head. "You're making a mistake." The millionaire didn't blink. "No. You did. The moment you threatened her." The men exchanged a look. Then, without another word, they turned and left the restaurant. The danger wasn't over. But a line had been drawn. The manager cursed under his breath, then turned to the ex-wife. You just made things worse for yourself. The millionaire smiled coldly. No. She didn't. Because you're finished. The manager's face twisted in anger. You can't touch me. The millionaire leaned in. You stole from her. You abused your employees. You're involved with criminals. I don't need to touch you. I just need to make one call. The manager paled. The millionaire pulled out his phone. And dialed. The millionaire held the phone to his ear, his expression calm but dangerous. The restaurant manager's face paled, his smug grin fading. The ex-wife watched in silent shock. The phone rang twice before a voice answered. Mr. Carter, what can I do for you? The millionaire didn't blink. I need a full report on the restaurant called Lexington's. Financials, licensing, employment records, everything. Now. The manager's face twisted with panic. Wait. Hold on. The millionaire ignored him. Also, he continued, his voice sharp, I need background checks on the owner and the general manager. If anything illegal turns up, I want authorities notified immediately. The manager lunged forward, trying to snatch the phone away. You can't do that. The millionaire stepped back easily, his gaze ice cold. I just did. The call ended. The restaurant fell silent. Customers were watching, waiters had stopped working, and even his new girlfriend, still at the table, looked stunned. The ex-wife stood frozen, her eyes wide with shock. The manager's breathing was ragged. You think you can ruin me? The millionaire adjusted his cufflinks. No. I know I can. The manager took a step back. Then another. And then, his fear turned to rage. You have no idea what you just did, he growled. These people don't just let things go. You think they'll forget this? The millionaire's voice was steady. Let them come. The manager's eyes flickered with real fear. He knew. The people he worked for, they weren't invincible. They operated in the shadows, relying on people like him to do their dirty work. But now? Now, they were exposed. And when powerful people were exposed, they fell. A loud buzzing sound came from the millionaire's phone. A message. He checked it. It was already done. The restaurant's license was being revoked. The health department was on the way. Authorities were reviewing financial fraud allegations. The millionaire slipped the phone back into his pocket. You're finished, he said. I suggest you leave before the cops get here. The manager staggered backward, then turned and bolted for the exit. The tension in the restaurant broke. People started whispering, waiters exchanged glances, and his ex-wife exhaled sharply, like she had been holding her breath for too long. The millionaire turned to her. You're safe now. She looked at him, her eyes filled with emotion. Why? She whispered. Why are you doing this? He held her gaze. Because I should have never left you in the first place. She sucked in a breath, her lips trembling. But before she could say another word, police sirens filled the air. The manager was gone. But his time was up. The sirens grew louder, flashing red and blue lights reflecting against the restaurant's glass windows. The millionaire stood still, his mind racing. His ex-wife stared at the entrance, her hands instinctively cradling her pregnant belly. She was safe now. The doors burst open, and 2 police officers stepped inside, scanning the room. The staff and customers fell into a hush, watching as one of the officers approached the millionaire. Sir, we got a tip about illegal activity linked to this business. Can you confirm? The millionaire nodded. Yes. Check the manager's office. You'll find everything you need. One of the officers turned to the staff. Where is the manager? A waiter, one who had clearly been waiting for this moment, pointed toward the back exit. He ran. But it's about time someone did something. The officers exchanged glances before one spoke into his radio. "We have a suspect fleeing on foot. Get units around the perimeter." Within seconds, they were gone, chasing the man who had made his ex-wife's life miserable. The restaurant slowly returned to life, but something had shifted. His new girlfriend, still seated at their table, finally stood up and walked toward them. She crossed her arms, eyeing the ex-wife, then looked up at him. "I think I already know the answer, but, are you coming back to the table?" The millionaire took a slow breath. He turned to his ex-wife, the woman he had walked away from. And in that moment, he knew. He shook his head. "No." His girlfriend exhaled sharply, giving a bitter laugh. "Yeah. Thought so." She turned and walked out without another word. But the millionaire didn't care. Because when he turned back to his ex-wife, he realized, she was crying. "You didn't have to do this," she whispered. His voice softened. "Yes, I did." Her hands shook. "You shouldn't have come tonight. You were supposed to be gone. You were supposed to move on." His chest tightened. "I did. But that doesn't mean I stopped caring." She let out a breathy, disbelieving laugh. "I don't need saving." He nodded. "I know. But you deserved better than what happened to you." She looked down, wiping her tears. "And then," she whispered, "the baby is yours." His world stilled. He had suspected it, had felt it in his gut, but hearing it out loud, it was different. His throat went dry. "Why didn't you tell me?" She swallowed hard. "Because I didn't want you to come back just because of the baby." He stared at her. "You really thought I wouldn't have cared?" She shook her head. "I thought you would have felt obligated. And I didn't want that." His heart twisted. This woman, the strongest person he had ever known, had been carrying his child, fighting for survival, refusing to reach out because she wanted him to choose her out of love, not guilt. And he realized then, he had chosen her long before he even knew the truth. He took a slow step forward. "I'm here now. Not because I have to be. Because I want to be." She looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of doubt. She found none. She exhaled shakily, then, for the first time that night, she let him hold her. And as he felt her body relax against his, as he felt the warmth of her presence, as he thought about the baby, his baby, he knew. This was his second chance. Not just with her. Not just with their child. But with the life he should have never walked away from. The lesson. Some mistakes in life can't be undone. But sometimes, life gives you a chance to make things right. And when it does, you take it.